AMA weekly startup reality check, and excited to have you all joining us. So I'll give it a moment or two, as I know the live stream will be just kicking off here for LinkedIn, but excited to have you all in this space. We had a few questions that were submitted, so I'll be hopping into that. Additionally, if there's any questions that are coming in live here on LinkedIn, I will prioritize those live ones as we always do. So, as you can see, it's just me here today. JDM is they've added a new one to the team there. So, I'm excited for him to share more news next week or on the podcast. So, we'll give you that update here fairly soon. But with that, just wanting to hop in and get into the questions. So I'm going to warm up the chat and get rocking and rolling. So thank you all for being here. Throw those questions in the chat. So with that, I'm going to hop in. So our first question here was the startup that they're building. It's in the health tech, med tech space. Their target customer right now is vocational rehab organizations. We don't have a ton on what the product actually is, but the product is live, pre-revenue. And the question that they have is, what are the most productive paths of first contact? Is it the phone, email, or in person? So, good question here. I think the big thing that comes to mind is just what's the most efficient path to getting in front of your customers. So, oftentimes just being able to get in front of them. So, I can't necessarily say exactly what's going to be the best means, but if it's all of those seem to be cold outreach for the most part, which is we'd say it has a stronger evidence if you're able to get in front of them and actually convert them to being potential customers versus it being from warm introductions. But if none of those paths work for you, meaning you're not able to get them on the phone, or maybe you're calling the front desk and they're not able to make the connections to the person that you're actually trying to get in front of, trying to tap your network if you have one related to the industry is always a good approach, at least for getting those first set of contacts. But overall, I don't think in terms of most productive, I think of it as most effective in doing so, and that's very dependent on who your customer is. And so whenever we're thinking of channels, it's going to be dependent on who we're ultimately targeting, and we want to be as efficient as possible, because when we think about going from kind of this manual process that we're looking at to then building repeatability and scalability, we want to have a clear understanding of what our cost to acquire a customer is. And so is this something that we can repeat and scale and isn't too costly going forward? So if you threw something out there where we want to run paid ads, it might be pretty early in the process to do that because it's already expensive, versus you wanting to find that customer that has an early pain point that's both urgent and severe. So that's how I would tackle that one. But good question. So hopping into the additional pre-submitted, again, if you're on live, would love to take your live questions. So thanks for those that are here, and excited to dive on into our next round. So I have, I think, 3 additional questions. So quick pitch on this: it's a SaaS platform that helps independent arborists manage job scheduling, quoting, and client follow-ups in one place. In terms of stage, they're at the MVP stage. They're 4 months since starting customer discovery. In the context, in terms of their question, is they've done 18 discovery calls, and the feedback has been consistent. Everyone describes the same workflow problems. 6 people asked to be on a beta wait list, and 2 gave them referrals to other arborists. So this, founder thinks they feel like they have a strong signal. Their co-founder thinks we should be continuing to talk to people before they build. How do we know when we actually have enough to move forward? So I think it sounds like there's kind of discussions of what is the next step and how much discovery is enough discovery. And so I think the big framework that comes to mind for how we would approach some of this work is that thinking of that ladder of evidence. And so, if we're starting to have predictability in these conversations where we basically can predict in the next conversation when we ask this question, and they're basically, we know what their targeted response is. And if that response is around a self reported problem that is both urgent and severe, I would say we then can start to move into moving up that ladder, right? And so, that kind of information that we're getting in terms of these qualitative conversations, there is some signal that there's maybe a pain point, but what we then need to understand is their willingness to pay for the solution. So we've identified what we call problem resonance, and that there is both urgency and severity related to that. Now we want to see if our solution and the value, that being the outcome that we're positioning to them, is actually sufficient enough to them to sign up and at the price point that we're ultimately targeting. And so I would push you and your co-founder to really be thinking about how you would actually put a sufficient offer and actually measure if there's willingness to pay before you go and ultimately build it. If there's something that you need to build in order to like demonstrate that value at a high level, that being not necessarily the full-fledged product, but kind of a demo of sorts, to actually maybe that's part of the sales process. And so you need to build that into the overall framework going forward. But I would be thinking about, measuring that intent and willingness to pay before we fully go and build that full-fledged product going forward. So that's the first thing that really comes to mind in terms of kind of maybe some of the tension that, between the two co-founders that I'm maybe reading between the lines related to. I would hone in on making that decision based on data. And so coming to an agreement of saying, okay, our next set of experimentation is we're going to move away from, say, discovery, but we're going to maybe go back to those 18 people. And we know we should be building if we're able to get X number of them to sign up as a pre-order or whatever that might be. And so actually exchanging potential payment, right? So you have this beta wait list. Now, how can we move up that ladder from the wait list to actual, pre-orders, or maybe they're actually willing to pay you for it, right? And so then now you have sufficient evidence to say, let's move forward down that process. So I think if you root that decision based in that data and evidence, I think that would be much stronger. But I think overall, one of the things I wanted to highlight was kind of our team framework. So that being one, there's access that they're providing. So one, making those referrals to other people. And I think the major element we want to start to tackle is that money element that'll actually help us really move forward and move up that ladder around willingness to pay. So we're moving from that customer discovery to customer validation, which is that second step in the 4 steps to the epiphany, but is really us moving up our ladder of evidence. So that's how I would tackle that. So keep going down that path, and if you want help building that next experiment, feel free to reach out to us. But love the question and kind of how you're thinking about moving forward. So again, if you're just hopping on, I'm taking the pre-submitted questions here. If you are on live and have some questions that you want to ask, throw them in the chat, and I'll take them live. We prioritize the live ones, so be sure to ask those questions while you're here. But hopping on to our next pre-submitted question. So the quick pitch for this, it's an AI compliance documentation tool that maps FDA regulations to a food manufacturer's internal SOPs and flags gaps automatically. In terms of stage, they're pilots, but they're unpaid pilots, and it's been 7 months since their launch. In terms of the question and context they provided, they're 3 months into a free pilot with mid-sized co-packers. Their QA team, so quality assurance team, uses it daily, and their compliance manager told me that last week it's already saving them hours. But when I raised converting to paid, she said she needed to loop in her VP of operations and her legal team before committing. The conversation was 2 weeks ago, and she's gone quiet. I don't know if it's being stalled or if there's a real deal there. So I think the unearthing thing, and this is kind of the gap that we see when we do things that are unpaid, particularly pilots that are unpaid, is we've pushed off the major risk of understanding who our economic buyer is and what's in it for them. So in terms of like the users, you have some clear definition of who that would be and the value that they're getting. I still have some questions related to this is just saving them time and quantifying that time into like what does that allow them to do? Does that allow them to ultimately spend more time on another part of the operations that generates more revenue, or saving them time allows them to focus on other things that ultimately cut costs? So that's how we want to be thinking about it. It's not just purely saving time, but like what is the outcome of that overall time savings. Additionally, we haven't fully mapped out, because we didn't actually push the willingness to pay in terms of doing this as an unpaid pilot, that we didn't really know who needs to be a part of the decision making in terms of who the economic buyer is. And so I'd really hone in on who that is going forward, and who needs to be a part of that overall decision making process. So I think going back to it is maybe following up with this individual to say, can we get all of the key decision makers in one room to maybe have a conversation? Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to demonstrate why that person's life is better. So that being in the VP of operations and their legal team, like why is their life better for buying this particular product? Because if it helps them reduce risk or other things, then maybe that's why they would go forward. The last thing that I want to highlight is, again, going back to our team framework, or what we call as our 4 asks. What we're seeing kind of break down here is the time and effort element, and actually probably I'd say more so access, right? They're not necessarily being forthright and saying, hey, here, talk to our VP of ops. They've kind of just gone more silent. And so we want to ultimately take a pause here and say, okay, before we go full build and continue to get more people on these unpaid pilots, we want to truly map out what this economic buyer landscape might be. And so we call it like an economic buyer map. So who uses it, who benefits from it, who pays for it, who's the approver, who signs, right? And we haven't done some of that legwork, which we pushed a number of risks off. So in terms of next steps, I'd follow up with them and say, we'd love to map out kind of what that decision-making process looks like and understand what those gaps are. If not, I would kind of go back to then who you might have in the pipeline for these future pilots, and start to transition them to those paid conversations. Even if it's paid after, at least we're seeing who needs to be a part of those decision-making process going forward. So that's the next question there. So want to see if there's any additional questions here in the chat. So giving it a chance to see. Going once, twice, thrice. All right, I'll go on to the next pre-submitted question. So I do only have 2 more questions. So if you're here, throw it in the chat. Would love to hear what questions you all have before we, get rocking and rolling with those last 2. But again, appreciate you being here. And all right, we got 2 more questions. So I would love for you to throw your live questions here. So this is a B2B marketplace connecting commercial real estate brokers with vetted freelance transaction coordinators for deal support. They're revenue generating. They have $4,200 in MRR, 14 months since launch. Overall, they have 40 paying brokers and 60 coordinators on the platform. GMV has been flat for about 11 weeks. They've tried 3 different outreach campaigns to activate dormant brokers, and none of them moved the needle. The brokers who are active say they love it. The ones who signed up and went quiet won't tell them why. So they have some churn going on. But I'm starting to wonder if we have a retention problem or a customer selection problem, and I don't know how to tell the difference. And so It's a really great question here. We when we think about churn, we want to think about kind of what we call like the three P's of churn. So, is it a people problem? People problem? Is it a product problem? Or is it kind of the problem for lack of a better term? So, that meaning in terms of a people problem, you've acquired the wrong brokers to your ecosystem. So, basically, as they came into the ecosystem, they're churning because at the end of the day they don't really have the core problem that you're looking for. And then the next is the third P around the product. So, are they coming in? They wanted the value that you're going to be providing, but at the end of the day, the product didn't solve the problem in the way that they wanted. And so it's a little bit of the how. And so you have the right person with the right problem, but the product isn't the right fit. And so then you're going to do a product fix. The other one is around kind of the what we say is the promise. And so you had the right person, with the right pain points, but the promise of the outcome that you're selling, so how their life is better, wasn't particularly landing. And so those are some of the reasons we would be seeing churn. It's a little hard to diagnose when we're not able to get those conversations, but we want to have some theory about what that looks like, and then start to look at how we might start having those conversations with our existing customer base. So, if we believe that it's a product problem, is there things that we can do to start tweaking that, not majorly, but to go and experiment to see if we can tackle that further? If it's a people problem, so we're seeing this clear pattern of the people that are churning are looking like this in terms of some of the psychographics and elements. And so it's like, okay, let's actually go back to the drawing board or see people in our pipeline who look like that, in terms of, again, those psychographics or the things that they're eliciting, that we then can go back and ultimately maybe retarget a different customer persona, because that's one that's leading to a high level of churn. In terms of this 14 months, 4,200 MRR means the growth engine isn't really working, right? It's kind of plateaued. It's not totally a crisis, but it's ultimately a signal that potential customer selection might need to be tightened a little bit. Particularly, we don't know the unit economics here, so that being your lifetime value to your cost to acquire a customer. But if you're not getting that payback period to even take place, so that meaning they're not staying in the platform as long as it is for us to ultimately pay to acquire them, then that's a real concern that we need to be looking at. So those are just a couple of the things that we need to maybe hone in on. I would say, take some sort of experiment going forward related to those three P's. So we want to have some theory of what that looks like and how we ultimately will be focusing our energy and efforts going forward. And then ask ourselves those questions related to the payback period. So are we actually having a sufficient return from customers, or are they churning so early that these customers we are acquiring, basically we're losing money every time we're bringing a customer in. And that's obviously a major risk and thing we don't want to have to continue to grow. And if that's the case, let's put a pause on our marketing efforts and make sure that we're not continuing to acquire customers that are ultimately leading to us losing money more rapidly. All right. So that's the fourth pre-submitted question. So again, thanks everyone for the submitted questions. I have one more to go through, but I do see people on here, so I'd love for you to throw in the chat just to make sure we get your live questions here answered. But if you're cool just us answering these questions here that were pre-submitted, that's awesome as well. We appreciate you being in the space. So the last pre-submitted question here is the quick pitch. It's a predictive maintenance platform that surfaces equipment anomalies from mid-sized manufacturers to reduce unplanned downtime. In terms of stage, they're at the MVP stage. They're 9 months since launch. The question and context they have is they keep getting introduced to plant managers and operations directors who engage deeply in discovery. They share data, describe real pain, and sometimes refer them to other colleagues. But when it comes to moving toward a paid pilot, they consistently say they need budget approval from someone above them. I've closed 0 deals in 6 months, despite what feels like genuine interest across 14 conversations. I'm not sure if I'm targeting the wrong person from the start, or just don't know how to get to the economic buyer once they're already opening the door. So I can't think key things here. So I'm seeing a case of what we call the say do gap, right? And so the say do gap is where we're getting this. They're demonstrating interest, and I would say, one of the things we need to really be thinking about is like, how are we phrasing those conversations? Like, is it saying, "Hey, we're working on this thing," and is that interest to you? And they're likely to, again. Just because they know the risk you're taking to be an entrepreneur, they're more likely to be like, yeah, that's something that we would be interested. But then when you're actually making one of these asks of talking to the economic buyer, that what they're saying doesn't align with any action that you're asking them to take. And so we're seeing some of this say do gap. And so one of those elements is like taking a step back and saying, are they truly interested in asking ourselves that hard question? And then secondly is if there's maybe a misalignment with at them doing the ask, and maybe they are asking, but the economic buyer doesn't see the value, and so it's kind of dying there. And that's obviously a risk in that process. And so one of the things we could do, instead of saying directly making saying, hey, we want to, the ask is to have more of maybe one of those discovery style questions. So really asking, can you tell us about the last time when you purchased one of these technologies? What was the process, and who needed to be a part of that decision making? And that will help us front load what the major risks are in that space, and then ultimately be able to dive in from there. And so if they're like, oh, well, the last time we purchased a technology, these are the 3 people that need to be part of the decision, and this is what they're looking for and kind of the criteria that they use. Well, now we have a whole bunch of information. One, who the economic buyer is, their budgets, things of that nature. And so we can then start to use that to say, hey, would you be willing to introduce me to this person? And now we can start to quantify the value for them, which will be a key component in that decision-making process. Because if we're not getting from the user to the economic buyer, we have a lot of risk in continuing to go down that particular path. So that's where I would be honing in and focusing our efforts on. And so we always want to get in front of that economic buyer, because without that, that's a key component. And then this is very similar to kind of that earlier example was we want to understand that economic buyer map. So who uses it, who pays for it, who gets the most value, and across that value chain, what does that look like? And then the biggest thing is when we think about understanding the problem, like how do they quantify the problem? Because that's going to be key for us to demonstrate what that return on investment will ultimately look like. So that's what we got thus far. Those are our pre-submitted questions. So I'll do a quick filibuster here while maybe you muster up the courage to ask your tough questions. But in the meantime, wanting to share just a couple of things. So we're rocking and rolling here at the Traction Lab. So we have our newest offering rocking and rolling. It's called the Traction Lab Investment Readiness Engine. So we are taking applications for this program currently. So we would love for you to apply if this is something you're looking to engage in. I just threw the link in the chat. So it's a great opportunity to engage the Traction Lab team to drive your process to get ready for capital. We support with go-to-market mechanics, and then also dive into investment readiness. So thinking about how not just you present your pitch, but help to actually gather sufficient evidence to put you in that point of raising capital going forward. Additionally, we are building out our next round of the venture school. So I'm going to throw out that link here. So the Traction Lab, give me a second there. So Traction Lab Venture School. This is a year-long worth of support from the Traction Lab team. We'll take you through some live framework sessions where we really dive into building those go-to-market engine. We call it your growth engine. So helping you systematically build that, and then over the year help you go through that experimentation process, gathering the evidence that you need for that engine to be successful. And lastly is, if you're wanting to continue to engage in the Traction Lab community, we do produce, a whole set of content. So we have our Traction Lab podcast, these weekly office hours, as well as our Traction Thinking articles. So I threw those links in the chat as well. So overall, would love for you to plug in So hopefully I've filibustered enough here. If not, no worries. But I think in wrapping us up, one, just want to say thank you everyone for your pre-submitted questions. Keep up the good work and kind of your approach in going forward. We hope I was able to give you some thought processes as you kind of tackle some of the risks that were highlighted related to your questions. But outside of that, would love for you all to continue to engage in the Traction Lab community. That be through the investment readiness engine, our venture school, or just plugging into content. So with that, I'll call it a day if there's no last questions that come in. Going once, twice, thrice, but thank you for coming and plugging in or listening if you're listening to this after the fact. But have a great rest of the day.